Thank you for joining us at World to Come Ministries, where we will be looking at Bible readings, Bible studies, and looking forward to the world to come.
Hello, welcome to World to Come Ministries. My name is Andrew Patch. So, thanks for joining us. This is part 2 of the life of David. We're going to go chapter by chapter in 1 Samuel, and we're going to look at David. We're going to look at what he's doing. In the first part, we saw that David got anointed by Samuel. He was the 8th son of Jesse that got in front of Samuel, and the Lord said, "That is the future king of Israel." Samuel anointed him, and then we saw that David went and calmed Saul because God put an evil spirit on him, and David was able to play the harp and calm his evil spirit. So we're going to continue with chapter 17, and we're going to talk about everybody's favorite story, David and Goliath. Now, if you don't know the story, I recommend that you read it for yourself, but we're going to go through on chapter 17, we're going to go through and we're going to read what this David and Goliath means. This is when David shows his warrior side, his follow God side. He shows that he is not afraid of a giant. So let's look and see what the Bible has to say about it. In 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shucho, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shucho and Azekah and Ephes Dammon. And these names are probably not at all correct, but we're going to do the best we can to pronounce the names. So verse 2, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by a valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. Okay, so Saul and the men of Israel are at war with the Philistines. So in verse 3, and the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armored with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. He had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So this is definitely a guy that you want to mess with. I mean, he's big, he has a shield, he has armor, he he is definitely a giant. He is not a little thing just to kick around. So verse 8, and he stood and cried around the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day, give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So they're at war. Goliath, a giant, armored, protected, ready to go, says, you send a man out to fight me. If I win, we will be your servants. Or if he wins, Israel will be their servants. If Israel wins, they will be Israel's servants. So the best response I can give to that is verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So they were scared greatly. So as we look at verse 12, we see David enter the picture. Let's see what David does. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of the 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So David did not go to war. He decided he was going back home to feed the sheep while his 3 older brothers followed Saul. So let's see what happens in verse 16. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. Okay, so this goes on 40 days. David's back taking care of the sheep. The 3 sons join the army of Saul. For 40 days they get this taunting from the Philistines saying, fight me. Verse 17, and Jesse said unto David his son, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain at their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. So David brought all the stuff like his father told him to, and the first thing he does is come, salute his brothers. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath, by name, and out of armies of the Philistines, and spoke according to the same words, and David heard them. So David's hearing this for the first time. Okay? Let's see what the response is. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man? This is come up. Surely to defy Israel he is come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So, I mean, if a guy goes up against and kills him, he has it made. Let's see what David says in verse 26. And David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? So David did not crouch in fear. He did not run away. He said, Why haven't you guys did anything? What happens to this man? Why are we letting him get away from this? That he should defy the armies of the living God. That should tell you a lot about David's heart. That should tell you a lot about David. Verse 27, And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab his eldest brother heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why comest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down, and thou mightest see the battle. So his brother says, What are you doing here? You're abandoning your post to come down and what? Just so you can see the battle? Verse 29, And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him towards another, and spoke after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. Okay, so Saul has now sent for David. Let's see what happens. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So first thing Saul says is, You're not qualified. You're too young. He has been doing this since his youth, and you are still in your youth. Verse 34, And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivereth me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. So David says, I've done this before. I've rescued my sheep. And he again, I like this phrase that David says, is, seeing he hath defiled the armies of the living God. David knows. He knows that the Philistine is not going up against him. The Philistine is going up against God. And God delivered him when he was looking after the sheep. So he knows God will deliver him from this Philistine. David has put his trust in God. And these grown men, these older war army people that fear the enemy, David says, there's nothing to fear. God has control. So let's look. Let's look here in 38, verse 38. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off of him. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip, and his sling, which was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. So Saul says, here, have my armor, have my sword. And David said, David said, this ain't going to work for me. That it doesn't fit. I haven't proved it. So he says, I'm going to go with what I have proved. I'm going to grab my slingshot. I'm going to grab 5 smooth stones. And I'm going to take out this enemy because God is behind me. So, verse 41, and the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was a youth, and ruddy, and out of fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and the beasts of the field. So the Philistine just pretty much laughs at him and says, You're not really a challenge. You come to me, I'm gonna give you to the beasts. You're gonna die. So let's see what David's response is here in verse 45. Then David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. So David says, You come to me with your shield, your spear, your you come to me with this. I come with God. So verse 46, This day will be the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee, and take thee head from thee, and will give thy carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with the stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. So he took him out without a sword, just like he said he was going to do, because he said, the Lord is going to deliver you to me. So, verse 51, therefore David ran, stood upon the Philistine, took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew and cut his head off therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Shuram, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, inquire thou with whose son the stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. So there you have it. David slays Goliath. I don't know how much more we can say about this part in David's life. He went to war, nobody thought he could do it, and he had more faith in the Lord doing it than himself. He did not say, I'm the powerful David and I am going to take out. He said, he's going against the armies of the Lord. He needs to be stopped. The Lord will deliver him to me. So, join us next time as we look farther into the life of David, what happens next,